everyone. It's wonderful to see a packed house. My name is Rahul, for people who don't know me, and this is Shriyam, of course, and needs no introduction. I sometimes wondered how this comes to be that we are fortunate enough to be able to host a satsang with Shriyam every year. And it's actually a head scratcher. I mean, the story, from my end at least, is that I, about 4 years ago, went on a weekend trip with 2 sets of friends, and in the back of the car was Shriyam's autobiography, and I saw it, and the title was so similar to Autobiography of a Yogi, which I loved, that I had to pick it up, but I was just skeptical. I'm like, okay, yeah, what is this? And so I opened a random chapter and I read it, and I was just stunned. And then I flipped to another random chapter and read it, and I read the whole book out of order, and I just couldn't put it down. It wasn't even my book, but I monopolized it the whole weekend. And then about 8 months later, Shriyam was in my house. And I think about what is it that actually draws him here, and I feel like a big part of that answer is the sincerity that all of you come with. So thank you all for being here with your deep listening and deep receptivity and willingness to learn and absorb. It really is a big part of what makes this happen. So our general flow and format is that I will be in dialogue with Shriyam for maybe about the first 40 minutes or so. And at that point, we've got an awesome crew of folks who are going to be helping with lunch. So they'll I'll give them a cue and they'll head into the kitchen and start preparing our lunch. But I will transition over to Q&A at that point and open it up to questions from all of you. Hopefully making sure that no one trips over the wires. I try and kind of navigate this really packed room. At the top of the hour, we're going to take a 5-minute break to very quietly and carefully pass out the food. And then once everyone has a plate, we'll resume with, again, your questions. And Shriyam will be available till about 1 o'clock, where he's heading out. So thank you again, Shriyam, for being here.
Let me say something to the question why I keep coming here. Well, it's also because there are lots of sincere people, as you said, who are here. I think somehow, somewhere along the line, I love you. So this is why I keep coming every year. And there's no need for any other explanation, I suppose.
Thank you. So my first question is, I probably asked you this in some form before, but to me, spiritual organizations seem just like every other organization, meaning they're full of good people and bad people, politics, egos, angels and demons, all of that, right? So what's your guidance to people who are deepening a path when their connection to the path is through a spiritual organization?
Very early in life I discovered this, because when I first started out, I thought at least genuine spiritual organizations might exist which have no such problem, that everybody would be angels. But it was not so. As I grew up, I discovered this. On the spiritual journey as I grew. And also when I first was a young man and I went to join the Ramakrishna mission, because Babaji had worked out, my guru had worked out some curriculums for me. Out of that, one was to spend some time in the Ramakrishna mission. And I went to the headquarters, I went to different branches of the Ramakrishna mission. I worked for at least 3 years with them, I think, more than that, in different places. I met quite a number of senior swamis and young people and brahmacharis, all fine, but when 2 people or 3 people come together, there's always a difference of opinion. And when there is an organization, especially it is like a closed compound, so these things build up sometimes and explode. I didn't realize that in the beginning, but there was a very senior monk of the Ramakrishna order who later on became the president of the Ramakrishna mission, Swami Ranganathananda. I don't know if you have heard his lectures or listened or read his talks. They're very sober kind of talks on Upanishads and Ramakrishna and Vivekananda and so on. This man, a very senior man, he came to visit the Ramakrishna mission center in Mumbai, which is in Khar. And I was a young brahmachari there, So then he came to know that, wherever you go, there is a link of a place where you were born, and it's there anyhow. If somebody says to somebody from Gujarat, Kem Chho, they immediately register. Majama, they say, the good man. We don't know if he's good, okay. And so, when Ranganathananda came to know that I'm from Kerala originally, he was also from South, but one of those people who at a very young age joined the mission, and he has served some of the stalwarts of the Ramakrishna mission. He started the Institute of Culture in Calcutta. So he called me aside and said, I need to have a chat with you. He said, look, now you've come here, don't think that you're landed in heaven, okay? This is also a small world. What is not exaggerated in the outside world might get exaggerated here because there is a small group of people sitting down and working. So it's up to you. You want to join factions? You do. If you want genuinely to work and advance and look into this matter of spiritual development and the spiritual, there are enough books available, and there are monks with whom you can consult and talk and discuss. It's up to you. But don't at any point think that you have landed in pure and absolute heaven. There are all kinds of people here. That they have changed their robes doesn't mean that they have completely changed. There's always the blueprint which we carry when we come, where we come from, and so on. So when this warning was given, I kind of learned to steer clear and carry on with my life. And therefore, now we have an organization. It's like Krishnamurti said, there's no need of organizations, and ended up with the Krishnamurti Foundation. I was also very careful about this until I also ended up with the Satsang Foundation. So we have an organization. Now, being an organization, we have all kinds of people. And I spend, actually, believe me, I don't think it's a waste of time. I spend a lot of time with people individually and in groups, trying to make them understand the other person's viewpoint. And that if a person is different from us, that doesn't mean he's good or bad. He's different. So, even in our Satsang Foundation, we have many branches now, many groups coming, and I really need to spend some time with the group trying to figure out how to solve the problem of people not being at loggerheads with each other. Okay, they're all faithful to me. They're very good with me and they want to further the work, but how one person wants to further the work may be different from the other. And then it becomes personal, and then there is a clash. And I have to be available to sort it out. So this is what happens. It's a fact, but then we need to, and you can't do a thing without some kind of an organization. You can't be alone and just carry, it doesn't work. If you feel you want to share, you need to have a group. When you have a group, it's bound to be different people coming together. Therefore, there are bound to be problems. We shouldn't start at the outset saying there's nothing, it's all one. There are no such utopias on this earth. Everywhere there is something going on. So how you handle it depends also on your spiritual integrity and the calmness and tranquility of mind which you have acquired. If you have that, then in this turmoil and turbulence you can provide a safe haven for people to sit down. This is what I need to tell you about.
And for your own teaching, you were fortunate to have a teacher one-on-one for a number of years, and he had no organization, no banner, nothing.
But he had only me.
Right.
I have many.
So can you talk about the distinction between following a teacher and following a teaching?
Yeah. There is a lot of distinction between the two in a way. However, if you look at it from another viewpoint, they are the same. It's not a contradiction. I tell you why. Because each teacher, however evolved spiritually, has certain personal qualities. What we should look at and not imitate the personal quality, but listen to what is being said and how it needs to be implemented. The great Jalaluddin Rumi, who founded the Order of the Whirling Dervishes, and who wrote the Masnavi and certain other texts which people hardly read, Fi Mafi and so on. He had a personal idiosyncrasy. He loved to sit in Turkish baths. So after several years of the Rumi, it's called the Mevlevi order, the order expanded and grew. Most of the members, I don't know if they know much of what Rumi said, but they know they have to sit in the Turkish bath. So that's not important, But with my link with Mysore Nath Babaji, it so happened that he, as you said, had no organization, no banner, no nothing, and he was moving from place to place, and I moved with him wherever he went. And he had it a little more simplified than I have, because he had only me. There were a couple of others, but nobody on a permanent basis for a long time. So there was a personal connection and a personal dialogue and personal, I won't say attachment, but a link, which was very great, which was wonderful. However, he made sure himself that I didn't get too attached to him. He said, the entire work I'm doing in you is to make you stand on your own 2 feet. This was his aim. But you cannot escape the fact that when you have someone like that, who is your guru, who is your father, mother, friend, everything put together, especially for a young man who has walked out of his house, run away from home, there is a tendency to kind of worship the person, mind. So I can't deny that I didn't look upon him with great respect and devotion and worship him. But he made sure that I thought what he was teaching was more important than his personality. It's very important to note this. People sometimes, I'm very careful about, see, I have a hairstyle like this. I keep repeating, you don't have to tie up your hair, please. Because then everybody becomes like sheep, not you. I've not seen you. We don't have much of a contact. You didn't even know that. Okay, so I hope you understand what I understand what I'm trying to say. That's more important than the physical. I remember this. It happens. There was Krishnamurti, when he went to Banaras. In the Banaras, some tailor was there who used to make a big robe for him. You don't have to worry, Mridul, you don't have hair, so there's no possibility not to worry. So, he used to wear a huge kurta which is stitched by the North Indian tailor there from Lucknow, and very loose pajamas. After a year or so, I found that many people started wearing that. Huge pajamas and huge kurtas, and I was wondering why they looked very odd and funny. Especially Krishnamurti, well, anything you wound around him, he would still look elegant. There was something about him. But here was this little puny guy wearing loose clothes and walking and sitting down and saying, we need to think. So I said, first think about this. And what are you wearing? So one has to kind of distinguish between the two. So while the teacher is important, and because he is giving us wisdom in teaching, we should respect him, no question about that. But he should not become more important than the teaching. The genuine teacher would ask you to learn what he's saying and not, I don't know, there is a, what's happening? Huh? I thought something was brewing. Which mic? You can't hear me? No.
No, sir, it just said you turn on that side.
But I have to look at him. So, are you okay, Deepu?
Yes, sir.
You won't trouble him again?
No, sir.
No.
What about the distinction between serving a teacher in teaching versus following a teacher in teaching? Which is better? Are they the same or different? What's the distinction?
I think the greatest service that you can do to a teacher, apart from if he's old and you're young, and he has pain in his legs and you do a massage, that's a good thing to do. Apart from that, the best service you can do to a teacher is to understand the teaching properly and practice it in your lives. This is the best service you can do to any teacher, because the teacher doesn't want you to serve him. He wants you to change. But because he is your teacher, there is a built-in feeling that you want to do some service to him, even physically. That's okay. Now, following means not to ask any questions, accept everything as the gospel truth. I don't think that's a good idea. And no real teacher would ask you to do that. Because for a teacher, it should be that you are clear in your mind what you're doing. And it's a teacher's job to make sure that happens. So questions are welcome, discussions are welcome, dialogues are welcome. When you say following, it means, okay, I say that a goat has 3 legs. You agree with it. No, but you don't have to agree with it. You can ask the question, perhaps the master saw a goat with 3 legs. Let me find out what it's all about. That's okay. But not the other way around. So I think it's not so much the following, but the learning which is important. I'm not saying that you should, when you say follow, if somebody is walking and you go behind him, that's also following. But what I'm trying to say is that the teacher, when he's trying to put something in our heads, it's when you follow that, then you are following the teacher. Now here we come to another point, which I keep telling our friends in the Satsang Foundation as well as the Blossom Foundation, that there are many people smiling here and there, that don't think that it is very important for you to have physical proximity with me all the time. Yes, sometime yes, I agree, there is something happening, but not all the time. And therefore, if somebody has physical proximity with me, because the person might be my cook, don't get jealous of this guy. He may not even be spiritually evolving, poor guy. I know a flower seller in Ganeshpuri who was all the time almost sleeping with Nityananda. the great, not this, some Nityananda, I'm talking about Nityananda Avadhuta of Ganeshpuri. So, he lived with him all his life. He still continued to be a flower seller till the end. Nothing happened to him. Proximity was close. So, while proximity is important if the teacher wants it to be, it's not necessary that I should compete to be physically close to the teacher. For the teacher, that's not important. Teacher is what you're doing and how you're advancing and how you're moving on the journey, that's important. And if the teacher thinks that it is necessary for you to have physical proximity, it will happen. You don't have to worry about it. Sometimes physical proximity may not be good too, because it might make you feel more important than the others. The moment you feel more important than others, then you're not on the path.
So
I may be wrong, okay? Okay.
So, with regard to what Maheshwarnath ji taught you, I mean, there's Kriya and a bunch of techniques, obviously. And there's a bunch of instances where he just emphasized kindness. You know, he's like, look, all of this stuff that you've been doing is of no value if you haven't been able to practice kindness. But what would you say are the meta teachings of the lineage, aside from the actual practices and kindness?
The Maheshwarnath ji came from the Nath Sampradaya, which is a very ancient tradition. In fact, if the Naths did not exist, probably the science of yoga might have disappeared or become less important. Because the pure Vedantins decided that if you keep saying, I am the Brahman and the world is an illusion, you'll reach there. Nobody reaches there. Okay, keep saying that, but nothing happens. You need to evolve and you need to open up a certain, I'm nothing against Vedanta, please, it's a great philosophy, one of the darshanas. If that darshana was self-sufficient, then the ancient Indian philosophers would have just thought about Vedanta. But we have Nyaya, we have Vaisheshika, we have Vedanta, we have Sankhya, and we have Yoga. Now the last one is Yoga, because Yoga is the science by which you train your mind and your body to open up those instruments of perception which exist in all human beings but are not active. It's only when these are opened and active that you can touch that which the Upanishads are talking about. So it's a very important part of yoga. So the basic teachings of the tradition that I come from, which also Maheshwarnath ji, he was a Nath. When he initiated me, he named me Madhukar Nath. So, is that even if you study a lot of philosophy, this is the basic teaching. You know, all the Sankhya and everything. If you don't practice a technique which is specifically given to you, maybe, to open up the channels of perception, then you're not doing anything. This is one teaching, important teaching of our tradition. The other is the practice of Kriya. Now when you say Kriya, it need not necessarily be the Kriya which we are talking about. It could be any Kriya. Because in the Yoga Shastras, there are a number of Kriyas. It can't be just one Kriya. And even if the Kriya that I talk about comes from some being called Sri Guru Babaji, from there directly to Maheshwarnath Babaji. I am not connected to the other parts of the tradition. There are many links and many hierarchies there. But to me, I learned Kriya from Maheshwarnath ji, who was Sri Guru Babaji's disciple, who learned Kriya from him. So when I talk about Kriya, it's that Kriya. And it is not in any way opposed to the Nath teachings or anything, because the Naths themselves have many kriyas. I'm sure you know that there are many existing textbooks on practical yoga. Hatha Pradipika, Garanda Samhita, Shiva Samhita, Siddha Siddhanta Paddhati, Goraksha Shataka. These are all textbooks on the practice of yoga. I would say even the Jnaneshwari, written by Sant Jnaneshwar in Maharashtra, who was himself a Nath. So, these are all textbooks on the practice of different kriyas. There could be different kinds of kriyas. Kriya simply means a technique, a method, for which you need to have a lot of self-study also. When you say Swadhyaya doesn't mean reading books. Swadhyaya, self-study. You understand? So all these are included, but the practice is important also. Because without the practice, you can keep learning and learning and learning, but not understand through experience what you are learning.
I know that there are a lot of people in the room who have experience or affinities with different Buddhist paths, whether it's Zen or Vipassana or other things. And in the, at least in the Theravadan Buddhism, there's, it's organized in three parts, right? Like morality, concentration, and wisdom. And Patanjali organizes it in 8 steps.
Similar way,
And they seem to me to be the same. Like, I don't think there was anything that was left out in either one. So can you talk about the similarity and difference between Patanjali's Ashtanga yoga and maybe the way that the Buddha
organized? Let me start with a simple thing. What is this popular posture that we called the Buddha posture? Was it invented by the Buddha? Buddha was a great being, there's no question. It was not invented by him. Where does Padmasana come from? From yoga, from the tradition of yoga. So according to me, from my understanding, the great Gautama was a great yogi himself. There is no dichotomy between the two. Well, the philosophy progressed in different ways. Gautama, the Buddha, Gautama is not the only Buddha. I'm sure people who are in this field will tell you, well, the title Hinayana is not a good word. I would say it's not a lesser vehicle, or anything of that kind. It's rather Theravada, or you can call Sutrayana. So, there you have the teachings of Buddha absolutely clear and plain. Diamond Sutra. The cause of all sorrow is desire. Get rid of desire is nirvana. You can put it in 2 words. But for that, Buddha himself worked through so many means. And many of them were yogic means. Okay. Now, Buddha also taught compassion, kindness. Now you take, and I'm sure those who enter the order of the monks, whether it is Theravada or the Mahayana, Vajrayana, they all believe and understand that there is a moral component to this, which is, how does Patanjali agree with this? Yes. Patanjali's yoga is called Ashtanga yoga, the yoga of the 8 limbs or 8 branches, 8 parts. The first 2 parts are yama and niyama. Nobody can go up to the end and reach samadhi without understanding yama niyama. Simply by standing on your head for 2 hours, you cannot reach. You need to have yama niyama. And yama niyamas are the rules and regulations the yogi needs to practice in one's life to move forward, the spiritual path. If you look at the yama niyamas, starting with ahimsa, The one important first mentioned yama is ahimsa. Now, ahimsa is what? Not to cause injury to others. What did the Buddha say? Same thing. Then there is truthfulness. Did Buddha say to be untruthful? No. Then there is simple living. There is also something called non-acceptance of gifts. Very difficult in this century that we live in. Because if you don't accept gift, the other guy thinks that he's done some terrible karma. This is why you refused. When you meet somebody, you give them a bunch of roses. Why was it said not to receive gifts? So that the person who receives the gift then treats the other guy as more important than the others. But that's not how a yogi should be living. Everybody is the same. So, and truthfulness and ahimsa, these are all yama niyama. Also, moderation in food. Not too much food, not too little food. You know the story of how Buddha was one of the Shravanas. And then he fasted himself. He was on the verge of dying when he got up and said, no, this is not the way. So he ate some food. Which is what? That there needs to be a moderation in everything. This is the key of the yama niyamas. And Gita puts it beautifully by saying, this yoga is not for him who eats too little or eats too much, sleeps too little or sleeps too much, or torture the body. Gita doesn't say that, I'm saying this. Okay, you need to look after this temple, which is the temple that carries the divine in some way. So these are all common points that are there in the Buddhist teaching. And if you go into the practices, the Theravada Buddhists have one basic practice, which is vipassana. There are a few others, but this is most important, which is awareness. Awareness of your breath linked to the breath, and awareness of everything that's happening in your body. If you go to the Mahayana teachings, there are a number of teachings which are so similar to yogic teachings, including the tantras. The Vajrayana also has a section, the Tantrayana. And there are many practices which are common to both. There are yogic practices. So I think when a teacher comes and teaches a particular, that becomes more important. That doesn't mean he rejects everything else. The reason why the Buddha rejected Sanskrit was because he thought it is with some elite group of people, so let's do it in the common language which people know. And since we are on this subject, today we all worship the Buddha in the image. We don't know exactly how Buddha looked, I'm sorry, because nobody knows, there were no videos, there were no photographs, nobody painted, nobody dared make a likeliness of the Buddha, because Buddha had said that he did not want any likeliness of himself worshipped. So it took 100 years till then. When you represented the Buddha, there was only a stupa and an umbrella on top of that. For 100 years. I know many people probably don't even know this. 100 years. Then Buddhism went to Afghanistan. And there for the first time, Buddha's images they started making, and they were like Greco-Afghan Buddhists. In the robes which Buddha is wearing, it's quite Greek and Afghan. So we have these beautiful pictures and beautiful. So till then nobody knew how to even look, because Buddha's intention was not that people should worship him, but that people should understand the teachings. But it's quite natural that people worship someone great like that. We have this tendency to worship. I'm not arguing about that, I'm just trying to. And the posture in which Buddha said is a typical yogic posture called Padmasana. Right? The Jains, the Tirthankaras are not gods. And yet we worship the Tirthankaras. Why? There's an innate desire for a human being to worship something that he thinks is superior. But as far as the Jain philosophy is concerned, there is no place where you need to worship the Tirthankaras. In fact, the Jains are one of the best practitioners of Ashtanga Yoga. Lots of great Jain teachers have done it, Mahavira himself. Except that it's so tough and extreme that it's not easy for most people to do.